good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this short talk, this session about survival in times of disruption, 75 years of Aufbau Publishing. Today I have with me the famous publishing director of Aufbau Publishing House, Dr. Constanze Neumann. I'm very happy that you are here with me to share some information and some of your insights as a publishing professional and, of course, as the director, the publishing director of Aufbau, which is one of the most famous German publishing houses and was founded in the former GDR. Welcome, Constanze Neumann.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here today with you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure that not everybody in Southeast Asia has heard of Aufbau Publishing. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of the publishing house?
Yes, of course. This year is a very special year for us, not only as for everybody else because of Corona, but also because Aufbau was founded 75 years ago. So this was supposed to be a year of celebration and festivity. And as you can imagine, that has not happened as we had imagined to do. So the publishing house, as you said, has been founded 75 years ago in the former GDR. It is a foundation by communists returning from exile to the eastern sector, the eastern sector, and they founded the publishing house in August. Which is very early. It has been the first license on German ground for publishing house. Those persons, people who founded the publishing house had the intention of bringing back those books to Germany that had been banished by the Nazi government. And it was their intention to bring it back to bring those books back to the reading public. So they started out with authors such as Anna Segers, The Seventh Cross, but also with classical authors such as Heinrich Heine and many more. It was a very successful founding of the publishing house. For example, The Seventh Cross was an instant bestseller in Germany. It had been published in the United States before. It had been a huge success in the States before the war and during the war. And it had, of course, never been published in Germany before. So the first 2-3 years before the two German states had been founded, Aufbau was certainly the most successful publishing house in Germany. Of course, after the division and the two states came into existence, that quickly changed because of market conditions. So very interesting history of the publishing house, and of course it has been quite different, many different things happened during GDR and then of course after reunification. So our history is yes, very special, and even if we could not do any festivities, we have published the story of the publishing house.
Wow.
Whether you can see it, so
yeah.
75 years of Aufbau, and you can read about all of this in the book.
Great, thank you. I think it's the only publishing house from the DDR, or which was founded in the GDR, that has survived until this day. Is that so, or is there any others?
There are some others, but it's the only major publishing house. And if you know that there have been 78 East German publishing houses, and the only major that survived is Aufbau, you get a feeling about one of the problems of reunification and about cultural life of Eastern Germany that has just vanished, and that goes also for newspapers, for magazines. So our role, one of our roles, which is very important, is to show that there is a continuity from our founding days to today. On the other hand, it's also important to say we are a German publishing house in every sense. So we are not only focused on our Eastern German past. So that is very important to have both ends in mind. Okay. And it's not easy to live up to this every day.
I can imagine. But what is really interesting, I think the Aufbau Verlag is located in one of the most exciting publishing buildings in Berlin, in the capital, or now again the capital of Germany. So and you also said that after reunification, the publishing house had to face a lot of challenges because of new market conditions. How did it manage to survive, and how it looks to me as if it's very well off nowadays in this beautiful building, which also houses a lot of cultural institutions and creative businesses. How did that happen?
That has been a long, long way with many steps and also side steps. So it has not been easy all the time. To speak about the building means to speak about our present owner, the owner of the publishing house, who has been very, very important for the success. He bought Aufbau in 2008. And he also built this building, which is in a part of Berlin in the west, but very near the eastern border. So it has even if many young people may not even notice, it has a symbolic meaning. And it's also important that beside publishing houses, there are a lot of creative startups, a bookshop. So it's a very special atmosphere. And Mr. Koch, who bought the publishing house, had the idea of that very symbolic building, and every day you get a feeling of a very creative environment. How did the publishing house manage to be where it is today? As always, it depends to find the right authors. In this case, it also depended on a certain change management, because Aufbau was a huge publishing house in East Germany. So it had 80 editors. Mm-hmm. So only the editorial department consisted of 80 people. Just to give you a comparison, now we have 38 people working for Aufbau. Mm-hmm. So you see where we came from. So there had to be a lot of change managed. The structures in an economy such as GDR is completely different from a market-oriented economy we have now. So there has been many steps to come to a structure that allows us to work successfully. But of course, as always, it depends on the authors. And for example, in the 90s, the most important discovery has been the diaries of Victor Klemperer, the philologist from Dresden, whose diaries during the Third Reich had been discovered only then. So that has been a worldwide success. We have sold licenses all over the world. for this book. So as always, it also depends very much on books, and especially during the last 7, 8, 9 years, there have been a lot of very successful authors.
Mm-hmm. That's very good to hear. You mentioned that you sold worldwide licenses for Viktor Klemperer's book. What is the international work like? Do you sell a lot of rights? Do you buy a lot of rights?
As all the publishers in Germany, for us, the international markets are very important. Of course, the English-speaking markets are important. We buy a lot of rights from the US, from the UK. Our biggest success this year has been an American book, Sigrid Nunez's novel, The Friend, which we published in January and which has been on the bestseller list for quite a long while. We also buy a lot of rights from Eastern Europe out of tradition. So we have at least one novel from Russia each season. We have an eye on all the other Eastern European countries. We are very interested in literature from Italy, from Israel, and also from France. Mm-hmm. So these are our
main
regions.
Markets. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've had a huge success with South Korean writer Han Kang.
Oh yeah.
And following this, we have had some titles from Japan, which have been successful. So we started watching that area more closely, but of course it always depends a lot on whether you have people in the publishing house who are able to read the original, so as not to depend on readers' reports only. And that, of course, is much more difficult with Asian markets.
Yeah, I understand. When we talk about difficult times right now, during Corona times, I'm sure we all face a lot of challenges. When we talk about how to overcome the challenges and also how to overcome the challenges that have been there before Corona, new developments in products and things like that, where is Aufbau in that field?
That's a very difficult question. Of course, we focus, and we have focused long before Corona very much on digital publishing, on audio books, because we feel that even if the development in ebook publishing has not been as high as everybody suspected 10 years ago, where everybody was saying, well, we won't have printed books any longer. We now know that this is not true, and it won't come true for the time being. But still, we focus very much on ebooks. We have an ebook only label. We have a manager of digital rights who is buying backlist from other publishers, which is published as ebook only. And we found that working with audiobooks is a field that is growing very, very fast. So by now, we do a lot of audiobooks ourselves. And we see that this is something which is every year more successful. So we are learning from day to day to go deeper into that business. For the crisis, of course, when the first lockdown came in March, we were kind of completely in a shock for some days. As everybody, we had to organize mobile working within days, and we didn't know whether people would buy any books at all, and so for like 1 or 2 or 3 weeks we were really thunderstruck, and then we saw that people kept buying books. I mean, we talked to booksellers and they told us it's a little bit like pre-Christmas sales. So people went into the bookshops and got books, and were actually reading during lockdown, not only watching Netflix. And that has been a fact for me that made me very happy and also very optimistic, because I think that in that moment of lockdown, people found a way of dealing with problems also via books. And that for us, I think, very important message. So in the end, after the lockdown, after bookshops were closed in most of the country, not in Berlin, but in most of the country, we found that we have had a good year all the same. So we didn't have major problems. Of course, we saw that the big names went even better. And there was not so much tension for a discovery, for literary discovery, as maybe there was before. Also because magazines, newspaper didn't give too much room to those discoveries, because they were all covering the crisis and Corona. So that was, for some titles, it has been difficult. For others, it was more easy. So I have to say I'm optimistic, and I think we can be quite proud of our product, and we can trust the book to take us a long way.
So do you think you're gonna have a minus at the end of the year, or do you think you'll see growth?
No. No. We will certainly see growth, and we won't have a minus.
Yeah. Wow, that's really good to hear. Yeah, very motivating. Wow.
No, it has for each and every of us, it has been very motivating to see that people need books in a moment of crisis. That's something we have to work on, and we have to go ahead and go out, because I remember all those years when the ebook turned up, when smartphones turned up. I have been in the industry for 20 years, so each time people were saying, oh, well, now it will be harder for us to sell books. And so now we've seen, even in a moment of crisis, the book is something you need, something which helps you in this situation. So no, we are really very optimistic at Aufbau.
Great, very good to hear. And since you talked about ebooks, do you see? I mean, you have an ebook only imprint. Do you see a growth in ebooks, and have you seen a growth during this crisis?
Yes, of course. Of course, many people, we have seen a growth during the crisis, because with bookshops closed, for many it has been easier to download their books on their tablet instead of ordering it by mail. So yes, there has been a growth, and I guess there will be further growth. And but for us also, because our ebook only label has been expanding, excuse me, and we have been buying more backlist titles for our book label.
Okay, it's also interesting because I mean, in the past few years, ebooks, at least that's what the official statistics from the Börsenverein say, they only grew a little bit, and are still sort of 5% of all the whole turnover with books. So I think I will be looking forward to see the numbers for this year. Really interesting.
Yes, me too. I can only say for our imprints, for our publishing house, and it has been a significant growth. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I would also be interested to hear a little bit about the situation for women in publishing in Germany. In Germany, of course, we have a lot of publishing houses where the leadership, the management level is still mostly male, but I think that is changing, like in many other areas in Germany as well. And you've worked with a lot of big publishers, with S. Fischer, with Pipa, and with Hoffmann und Campe. So what is your view on this? And how do you feel as a woman in a management position, in a high-level management position in a German publishing house?
Well, as you said, it is changing now, but it has been changing for a rather short amount of time. So when I started, for example, at Pipa, of course, there was a male publisher, and now it's Felicitas von Lovenberg. So that has changed. Same for Fischer, has been male, now female. So it's maybe the last 7-8 years it has been changing. It's not unusual, but still every now and then you see people reacting to the fact that there's a female publishing director turning up,
Okay.
So and you can see it in their eyes, they're kind of like the question, and where's the publishing director? And then you have to say, but that's me. Sorry, that's me. And you see they're kind of, surprised. It's the way it is. It is a change that came late because I've seen that in the UK and the US that has happened quite some years earlier than it's happening in Germany. It is happening now and has been overdue, and now everyone has to get used to that. But I think it's part of a bigger development of having getting publishing more diverse, generally speaking. I think that is a huge issue for the years to come, that not only it is more female, but it's also more diverse, that we publish books by different people, by people with different backgrounds, and that we also have people working with us of different backgrounds. So I think it's part of a wider picture. And then for Aufbau, of course, what is also important is that we have to have East and West German colleagues,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the management level, you will almost you won't find almost anyone from Eastern Germany. So even if that may not seem important any longer, as reunification 30 years ago, working for a publisher like Aufbau, you see that it is still every now and then an issue, and it is also an issue for people in the eastern part of Germany, because as all the publishing houses vanished, of course they want to have a feeling that books are also made for the whole country and not only for the western part. So that is also interesting to see who in those positions comes originally from East Germany or from the western part of Germany. So you get 90 applications for editor, for a job as editor, and you have only 6 people from the eastern part.
Yeah.
So that's also very interesting.
Yeah.
And something we have to work on. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Great. Well, we're almost at the end of our session, unfortunately, because there's so many more questions we would like to ask you, but hopefully we will see you in person at some point in Indonesia or somewhere else in Southeast Asia. That would be really nice.
That would be great.
Yeah, so we'll work on it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have a vaccination soon, and then we can work on it even more. But before we go, could you recommend some books from your publishing house that you think could be interesting for an Asian, Southeast Asian perspective, readership?
I think we have a lot of classical authors which are traveling around the world. That still goes for Victor Klemperer. I think he's a very interesting author to discover. It also goes for Hans Fallada, our famous author, who has been sold to many, many countries, has been a huge success in the English-speaking world. So these are books which can be read already in English, and I think that helps a lot to have titles that can be read by the editors for their market. So these classical authors are really for us very important, and I really recommend, if you get a chance, to contact my wonderful colleague Inka Imes, who's selling our foreign rights, and ask her about it.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, as I said, unfortunately, we are already at the end of our talk today. So thank you, Constanze Neumann, for sharing this interesting information about Aufbau Publishing and the situation in Germany. And yes, as I said, hope to see you in Indonesia or Southeast Asia soon.
Thank you so much, and I would be very happy to come and meet you all in person. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll do that next year. Okay.
Mengawali hari dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat tersajikan cepat, akurat, dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Maidcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Maidcom.id, digitally inspire people.
Sudah 15 menit, masih kejebak macet.
Tenang, daripada emosi, 15 menit Anda jadi lebih berharga kalau bersama saya.
15 Minutes, setiap Rabu, jam 6 sore lewat 45 menit. Mediaindonesia.com hadir dengan opini cerdas dan narasumber kredibel, mudah diakses, informasi berkualitas ada di genggaman Anda. Klik di browser Anda, www.mediaindonesia.com. Dan temukan pandangan berbeda, karena fakta bisa sama, sudut pandang boleh beda. Mediaindonesia.com, views and news.
Dalam setiap denyut kota, saya selalu menjadi saksinya. Disiarkan lebih dari 20 televisi jaringan Jawa Pos Group. Jawa Pos TV, paling Indonesia.
Kebebasan pers dan gelombang era digital menghadirkan ribuan bahkan jutaan informasi dan data setiap harinya. Beragam data dan informasi berserak di berbagai tempat seiring dengan perubahan dunia yang bergerak begitu cepat. Media-media baru pun bermunculan, namun kualitas informasi seolah tak lagi menjadi prioritas. Bahkan, tak sedikit yang abai pada etika jurnalisme. Untuk menjawab tantangan itu, Kata Data hadir sejak April 2012 sebagai portal media di bidang ekonomi dan bisnis. Beragam sektor diulas mulai dari finansial, energi, pangan, hingga industri kreatif dan digital. Artikel mendalam dan komprehensif dengan sajian infografik yang menarik menjadi karakter utama dari Kata Data. Kata Data berikhtiar untuk terus menyajikan beragam informasi berkualitas untuk kemajuan negeri dan untuk kepentingan bisnis Anda. Kami percaya demokrasi yang sehat tumbuh dari kehadiran informasi dan data yang akurat.
Kalau bicara pakai data.
Hidup terlalu pendek untuk membiarkan pemikiran-pemikiranmu, ide-idemu terdiam begitu saja. Untuk berubah, kita perlu melangkah. Dan langkah itu lahir dari sebuah inspirasi. Republika, start moving.